Great. Welcome, everyone. This is the first Ask Me Anything that I've done for CE providers or folks who want to become CE providers. Specifically, I'll be talking about NBCC and the option to become a CE provider with them. I've been a CE provider with NBCC for a couple of years now, and I am slowly growing the ability for me to support others in becoming CE providers, which also includes just sharing a lot of information that I've learned over time, both becoming a CE provider and then also maintaining maintaining all of the CEs, whether they're live or on demand. So I hope that this is helpful for y'all. You've been submitting questions, so I've got a great topic to dive into today. But if you do have other topics or questions, you can put those in the chat. Whether you're here live or watching it later, go ahead and put it in the chat. I get notifications, so I can always come back and read those questions or topics that you want me to go over. And I also have a form that you can fill out that I will put in the chat later on. I don't have it pulled up right now, but I'll put it in there. So if you're coming back later and looking for that, it'll be in the chat where you can submit anonymously any questions or topics that you'd like me to cover in upcoming Ask Me Anythings. I'd really love to do this maybe once a month, or if we grow to lots and lots of topics, we could do it once a week if that's something that you're interested in. So please give me that feedback so I can continue to grow this in addition to what I am writing through Substack. I've had a lot of fun with that, just every week tackling a different topic. So today I had a great question about the logistics of offering on-demand courses. I think many of us start with live courses, whether that's in person or that's online. And that makes sense because as someone who's applying to become an ongoing CE provider with NBCC, you do have to show at least two prior live trainings that you've done for CEs. And I think that many of us, myself included, often start by being asked to present for CEs for another organization. So we have local area health education centers across the state, and they're a great resource not only for getting CEs, but also maybe in becoming a presenter with them to kind of hone your technique if that's something that you're looking for. But that's one of the organizations that I really enjoy partnering with and being able to help them out with conferences or summits or one-off trainings, whatever that might look like. And my first ever offering of a presentation was for a local organization, a state organization that was doing a conference. And so they were offering the CEs. I wasn't, but I was there as a presenter. And that's really how I got started. So it was later on that I would turn some of my live trainings into on-demand trainings. And with NBCC, there are very specific things that you have to have in place to be able to offer on-demand courses or trainings. And I'll talk about some of the different formats that you can use for that, because it's not just that. I think our go-to right now is like a slide presentation that we are all sitting in together live. There are many other options for formats for on-demand trainings, but it does require that you become an ongoing CE provider with NBCC. So it's not like the single programs, which are just for live. This is on demand. So you've got to be an ongoing provider. So I'll talk some about options for how you can do this, as well as some of the like learning management systems and the way that I started out at the very beginning. I do want to just say, keep it simple, which I hope to use as like my mantra in life, come back to keep it simple. And I really mean that if you are applying to become an NBCC provider, an ongoing provider, and you're wanting to do the on-demand version, keep it simple. There is no reason to have like your best ever offerings and the most smooth and good looking website and it to be exactly how you want it, because you're literally just doing this so that the NBCC rep can see that you have all the things that they need in place. So for me, that meant getting a free account with a learning management system where I could host one product. that's all you need. You just need to be able to show one product. You do not have to show a whole catalog of trainings. You just need enough to get the application going. So I had a free account with that LMS. I had one product and I listed it for free as well because I really wasn't trying to sell it or tell anyone else about it until I had that NBCC approval so that I could provide CEs. So it was free so that the rep could go in there and access it without having to have like a coupon code or anything like that to get into the actual product. It also meant that with the learning management system, because it was a free product, I didn't have to pay any fees to be able to charge cards or anything until much later down the road. I used a Google form. So I had a Google Workspace account. It was very basic. They have different levels. At one point, I think the cheapest was like $6 or $12, something like that. Not too much to get access to most, if not all, of their apps. You're not going to get all of the different like attendance tracking for live meetings and stuff like that. But it's got all the kind of key things you need: an email, a Google Drive, you've got the forms. And that's what I used for my quiz and my survey. So the training itself was a recorded video. It was me. I had offered it earlier to kind of a closed group of people. I wasn't offering any CEs or anything, and they graciously allowed me to record it, and that's what I used for my actual training itself, was that recording, which was plugged into my LMS. And then you have to have a quiz and a survey. And mine were set up through Google Forms because it was included in my Google Workspace and linked into my learning management system. And the one that I had then and that I still have now made that pretty easy. I was able to link that Google form right into the LMS. So it went from training, complete that, right down into the Google Forms. It was all in one place, which it doesn't have to be, but that made it really easy for me and I think easier for the rep to go through. I also had a Certifium free account that would automatically issue the certificate once the person passed the quiz and the survey. This is something that I talk about often when I'm meeting with folks who are becoming a CE provider and worried about that certificate piece. Certifium was very, very helpful for me. They also have like a free version that you can use, and then there's other tiers. And so again, I just started at the free version. Was my certificate great looking? No. Did it get the job done? Yes. So that was all I really needed to use at that point, was the LMS and the Google Workspace, which included the Google form, and then that free Certifium add-on. And of course, since then, I have really expanded what I do. And so I have upgraded my LMS. I'm no longer using the Google Forms, although I could. My system does have a built in way to do quizzes and surveys and certificates. So it is all in one place. And it's not there are some improvements that could be made. The LMS knows that there are some improvements that could be made. But for me, it works really well, and I've not had any real complaints about it, even though I see from my end some different ways that it could be better. Um, I think the key here, if we're looking at an application to become an NBCC CE provider, is what one of my mentors told me when I was working on my dissertation. A done dissertation is a good dissertation. And in this case, a done application is a good application. This is not going to be your final product. So don't worry about it being, again, like the best looking website and the smoothest process through the LMS. You just need enough to get the job done, to get it submitted to NBCC and get on your way to being able to offer CEs for your on demand products. So, what does NBCC require of home studies when you're submitting them? Well, first and foremost, they do say the participants need to be able to easily navigate all of the components. And that is why, for me, it made sense to go ahead and get that like free version of the LMS, which I looked at some of the LMSs, learning management systems. Some of them do still have a free option, but many of them have like a lower tier option that doesn't cost too much, especially if you're wanting to grow within the LMS. I think starting in one that you're going to grow with might be a good idea. You don't have to do that, but it might be a good idea. You could house everything within Google Workspace. So you could house your training itself, if that is a recording or something written, whatever that might look like, and then have the person go to the Google form, fill that out for the quiz and the survey. And then once they've completed those, then they get the Certify 'em certificate sent to them automatically. So that is one way that you could use Google Workspace for everything. I did look to see, could you do something similar with Microsoft, which I think are arguably the two big contenders there for like email and all the other apps. Yeah, I think you could. I think it's not, for me anyway, it's not as user friendly to do that through Microsoft, but could you easily put everything in one place and have it linked up? You could, including the certificate. There is a way, if you are keen on Microsoft and know how to use like Excel and stuff like that, then you could figure it out. There are some walkthrough articles of how to do that. I haven't tried it myself, but just know that there are options out there. So, requirements, first and foremost, it must be easy to navigate by the participants. Everything I'm about to talk about should be really easy for participants to find and get through. And that's also going to be important for you as you're submitting your application, that you want it to be easy for the NBCC rep that's going to be going through the home study, because someone who is reviewing your stuff, you want them to not be frustrated. You want them to feel good about what they're going through. You want them to find it easy to look through so that your application can get moved on easier and quicker as well. Access to your program advertisement is required for the home study. And for me, I think this looks like your website and your landing page. Of course, it includes your marketing materials. And even before you get approved for NBCC credits, you do need to have some sort of clear statement about CEs. And it talks about that in the application. I won't go more in depth into having that statement, but that is going to be something important to include somewhere in your advertisements. And that's the marketing materials, that's your website or your landing page, wherever it is that they're going to go and read all of this information about your program. There's the program information that's required. So, policy section C15, you probably see that repeated over and over again in the application when you're applying and in any of the tools that you might be using through NBCC. It includes the registration requirements. So, this is like fees that you need to pay for the training. Do you have to create an account with my LMS? You do have to create an account. With the Google Forms, you did not have to create an account. So that's important to know. What are your registration requirements? Your content description and objectives, which are already required for the actual application, you have to plug those into the application. So you also want to make sure that those are very easily found with your program. So on that landing page for your program, in your marketing materials, wherever that needs to be, content description and objectives need to be listed. The name and qualifications of each presenter or author, because I will talk about your option to have a written home study rather than having something recorded. So, name and qualifications of each presenter or author. And I also like to put in a little bio. So, I've got the letters behind my name, but that doesn't really say, like, why am I the one talking about this? So having a little bio is going to be helpful too. The number of NBCC CE hours that are going to be offered. Do not use the term NBCC CE hours until you are approved and given your approval statement, but you could still say this is worth 1 CE hour, something along those lines. Also, don't use CEUs. That's another no-no for NBCC. And then you need to have your provider contact information. At the bottom of every page of my website is a question, how can I contact you? And then the contact information is listed there. It includes a phone number, an email, and a mailing address. Do not forget the mailing address piece of this. That is also listed in that C15, which types of contact information need to be included. There needs to be a secure way to register for the training. My LMS is it's not an EHR. It's not to the level of HIPAA, but otherwise it is a very secure platform to use for registration. So that's something else to consider for you, making sure like your registrations don't end up on some Excel sheet that anyone who registered can see, for example. Just want to make sure it's secure. I think we are, as clinicians, are already thinking about this because of all that we do to protect our clients and all that we do related to HIPAA. So just keep in mind, maybe some of the same things would apply to the secure registration for your home study as well. Yeah, so my LMS is Thinkific. And I can put that in the chat if that's helpful. I had used another one. Well, actually, I've used several, multiple different universities. I have used different LMSs before, and some of those are accessible to us as CE providers. So think about your big ones: Blackboard, Canvas. I can't remember. There's Moodle, and there's something else. Some of them are really priced for big organizations. So if you're a big organization, you're just adding on NBCC, that might be a way to go. Otherwise, I've got a list of LMS options that I can share with y'all other than just Thinkific, which honestly, if you just go into your favorite search engine and put alternatives to Thinkific, it'll talk about alternatives to Thinkific if that's not the one you want to go with. I've had really good luck with that, and maybe that's something I can talk about on another day, how I make Thinkific work for me, because it's been 2-year process of making it work for me. Um, the next piece, and this kind of goes with what we're talking about, you need for participants to easily access all of the learning materials. So it may be like what I talked about with a recorded video. It could be that written up learning material. It does not have to have audio and or video. And then also a reference list. And that reference list is something that you're going to submit to NBCC along with your application anyway. But you also need to make sure that that is included in your program learning materials. So you've got the actual learning itself, and then you've also got your reference list for how you created that program. Participants need to be able to access, complete, and submit a program evaluation, and that is known as a survey. So, making sure that you're getting feedback from participants on how easy it was to access your learning management system. How easy was it to register? What were the learning materials? How did they rate them? How did they rate whoever the presenter is? Things along those lines. If you're already a CE provider, you likely already have a survey of some sort. You just want to make sure that you are meeting some of the areas that NBCC requires. So that's another thing I can talk about a different day. Like, how do you make a survey and what questions should be included? But the NBCC does provide some examples of the type of questions that they're looking for as far as what they're asking about, and then like an open answer question versus a Likert scale or something like that. The participant also needs to be able to access, complete, and submit a learning assessment, aka a test or a quiz. And really, this is how MBCC is ensuring that the participant actually completed the program. For other CE organizations and accreditations, they are so strict as to, like, if it's a video, for example, you cannot fast forward, rewind, change the speed or anything like that the first time the person goes through the recording. They can do it after they've watched it once or listened to it once, but then the second time they'll have those options, but the first time they can't, because that organization, that's how they partially determine that that participant has actually completed the program. That's why if you are in some of the larger CE providers, learning management systems, you may find, which to me can be very frustrating and I understand it, that you cannot, like, I think you can pause, but you can't reverse, you can't fast forward, you can't change the speed. And there's definitely been times where I wanted to reverse something and had to wait until I was done and then try to go back and find that point. That is a requirement of some of those CE organizations. That is not usually the trainer just being a pain. That is a part of what the CE organization is requiring. NBCC does note that our test or quiz must be created by a professional with an advanced degree in a mental health field, which usually for them is defined by a master's or greater in a mental health field. And the questions need to evaluate the participants' knowledge of the program material. So, making sure your questions are aligned usually with like your learning objectives, that can be a great way to create questions. And then there also needs to be a minimum number of questions per CE hour, which the NBCC also talks about. So, this is NBCC's way of making sure that that participant actually went through the program and retained some of that knowledge enough to at least do the test or quiz. So, if you're wondering why you are required to do that after you've done a training so that you can get your certificate, that is why. Both the survey and the quiz are required by NBCC before you can get the certificate. That's a part of their requirements. You had asked about costs. I've actually written about that in Substack, so I'll put that in the chat before we leave. So if you need to leave early, you can always come back and grab that. But that might be something for me to talk about a different day and go more in depth. I talked about kind of the surface level of my costs. But yeah, definitely I understand wanting to map out like what is this going to cost overall. And I think for home study, because you're maintaining a database of, even if it's just one program, you're maintaining that, you're maintaining the quiz, the survey, the certificate process, maintaining the certificates, all of that, which I think can be really helpful to have in one place under LMS. That can get more expensive than doing live, because there are plenty of platforms for live where it can be free to host, and to sell tickets on, because maybe the participants take on the fees or there are no fees or whatever. So definitely for home study, everything I just talked about does potentially increase the cost of being able to host and maintain that. And the next piece here is the certificate, being able to get that. Certifyum has that free version. It does get hooked into a Google form. So that's something to just be aware of. But that is a low cost or free way to be able to hand out certificates automatically so that you're not having to check constantly to see, has somebody finished this? Do I need to send out a CE certificate, which does become burdensome with the lives. But for the on demand, there is a way to have that run in the background so that you're not constantly having to do this. It can be a certificate or a letter. There are some CE providers that I have gone to that give a letter rather than a certificate. We're thinking about the pretty certificate with the background and all that. Sometimes it's just a simple, like typed up letter on what looks like a Word document and maybe a logo at the top. So there are requirements, don't get me wrong. There are certain requirements that you have to include. They call them elements that you have to include on the certificate or the letter, but it does not have to be something super pretty if you don't want it to be. It can be very, very plain and simple, and it works. I mentioned using Certifium for certificates. There is a blog about using forms within Microsoft. I will put these here in the chat. Sometimes the chat does not like the full link. So we'll see what happens here. We'll just test it out. But that first one is to certify them. And the second one is, looks like it went okay, is a blog that I found about how to make the certificate process automated within Microsoft. So those are a couple of ways to do it. If you already have Google Workspace or you already have Microsoft, those might be low cost, simple ways to do it. If you're using an LMS, often your LMS does include an option to automate certificates. That does require a higher tier in Thinkific, the LMS that I use. So just be aware of that. If you're wanting to use a lower tier, you can use something called Zapier. Zapier, am I saying that correctly? That will help to integrate the certificate into your system with your LMS. That is also a way to integrate quizzes and surveys into your LMS. So if you are super handy with like the background of linking things and automations, Zapier is going to be your friend because you can have different systems set up that kind of link into one. So that's something to look at with your LMS search is, do you want it all in one place? If so, how much is that going to cost? And if not, can you use Zapier to pull in different programs and link them in the background? So again, just depends upon how complicated you want to make it, how well you are able to navigate some of the background systems and linking them all together. That is not a strong suit of mine. I like it all in one place at one time. But if you like doing that, then there are tons of options to link them all and integrate your system. I guess you could, no one asked this, but it's just at the top of mind. You could do this manually. If you wanted to kind of stay on top of this, you could do it manually. Like if you had a notification that went off every time someone submitted a quiz or a survey, which I don't think if it does, just FYI. If you wanted that though, you could be notified and then manually create the certificates and send them out. There is an expectation from NBCC that your certificate is going to come in a quote timely manner. For live programs, I think this generally means like 5 to 10 days for getting a certificate. For on demand, I think most people, even if it's not NBCC, most people are going to want that certificate ASAP. So that may not be a great call if you can't sit at your computer 24/7 and check those notifications. But if it is something you need to do at the very beginning, it's just what you need to do. So that's an option. Some of the LMS options that you have, I mentioned Thinkific, there's Learn Worlds, there's Moodle, which to me, I mean, it has been used by some of the universities and community colleges that I've worked with. Actually, one of the CE providers, now that I'm thinking about it, uses Moodle as well. I don't think it's as nice looking or clean looking, but it gets the job done. So if again you are good at maybe working in the background on things, Moodle might be a good low cost option where you can kind of tweak it to make it your own. Teachable is another one. I did use this originally and did not find it for me to be very user friendly, but it is possible. It's been a few years that they've maybe updated it and improved it. Padaya, Teachery, CourseLit, even Mighty Networks, which is similar to Circle. If you've done any of those, maybe professional organizations are using those, or you're following. It's kind of like a professional Facebook group, if you will. It's outside of Facebook, but it's kind of housed in its own place. The Mighty Networks does have an option to have courses in there and to offer certificates. LearnDash, and then Kajabi as well. So these are all options. Just pick one, go look at it, and then search for alternatives to insert LMS here. And you'll find lots of articles. You'll probably find some YouTube videos on why certain ones are better than others. It's probably going to come down to your price point and what of the um, essential aspects of the LMS. So, like, do they offer automated certificates, for example? Like, what are the features do you need, and at what price point do you get them? I was looking at another one, and it was talking about like the lowest tier does include automated certificates, but it's limited to a certain number of products. And by the time I got up to the number of products that I actually offer, which at this point it's hard to believe is almost 50, um, that price point was way outside my budget. So, that's where you got to compare. Like, maybe it makes sense to start with one because it's much lower price, but includes the features you want or need. But when you grow to a certain point, like, how much is that going to cost? So, just something to look for, current thinking and then future thinking as well. Let's see. I don't see any other questions, so I'll keep going, but feel free to plug those in as they come up. And like I said, if I don't get to them today, I will definitely come back and reply to them on here. Even if you're watching this later and you're putting in a question now, I see them and I respond to them. Some of the training format options, most commonly right now, and NBCC also notes this, the expected is that it's going to be online. So this is going to be a smooth transition from one component to the next. It's easy to understand. We are used to doing those now. And you get that certificate of completion at the moment that you finish. When you pass that quiz, you take that survey, you're finished, and you get that certificate. You can, though, create materials without technology, or maybe have a program where some of the components are available online and some are not. If you decide to do that, make sure that you thoroughly explain what the process is to access each component. How does a participant register and get all of those different components? The process needs to be user friendly. And again, they need to be able to obtain the certificates in a timely manner. And this made me think about a catalog that I received in the mail, and it is for CEs. So it is like, if you think about a phone book or the yellow pages, that kind of feel of paper and ink. It's very simple. Other than the cover, there's not any real pictures or anything inside. It is straight up, here's the topic, here's the article about the topic, here are the resources, the reference list, here's your quiz and your survey. So you can read it. You can manually, so to speak, with, written the quiz and the survey, complete that. And then it comes with an envelope where you put whatever CEs that you wanted to do into that envelope and mail it back in. There is the option to submit it online, so you still could read through it. You could do the quiz by hand if you wanted to, but then you go online to submit a quiz and survey. Or, like I said, you can mail it in. So that is one example that I can think of that isn't fully in one format or another. That is an option. I think that's pretty cool for folks who maybe don't want to do something online, don't have great access to computer or internet or something like that, or maybe just want to take the catalog with them on a road trip or something. I don't know. But you've got another option other than, I think, what we typically think of, which is that kind of slides and the audio and all that with the training. So I think that's pretty cool. Maybe in the future, I would consider doing something like that because I definitely think there are some folks who could really benefit from it. Some folks who maybe have vision impairment, hearing impairment, something like that could be another great option. I don't know, just something to think about. After the payments received by the company, the quiz and survey are received. If they get a passing score on the quiz, the certificate is then sent back to the participant. So you're not going to get an automatic certificate in that moment, right? No one's expecting that. If you are mailing in your responses, you're not going to get a certificate right away. So that's where I think that phrase timely manner comes in. And this company talks about After all of your stuff is received, if you pass that quiz, how long it is until you get the certificate. So that's just one example of how it might be done a little bit different. So, what are the formats that we can do programs? It can be written just like what I mentioned, although it doesn't have to be in like a hard copy. It could be online and it is in 1,500 word increments. So the minimum is 1,500 words, and that is like a quarter hour. We've got audio only. So I'm thinking about those who are doing podcasts, or I've done a few vodcasts, which is kind of like this. I don't have any slides, but I'm on here talking about a particular topic. Those CE credits are based on 15-minute increments. And then audio and visual, which is that kind of traditional training that I was talking about with slides and someone speaking, that's also in 15-minute increments. Now, one thing to know is if you, like me, are taking a live program and turning it into an on demand program, the CE credit is calculated differently. For live programs, you can round up to the nearest quarter hour increment, whereas for home study programs, it's rounded down to the nearest quarter hour increment. So, if, for example, you have a live training that is at 47 minutes, then you can round that up to that full hour. If that same live training from minute 1 to minute 47 was turned into a home study, it would only be an hour and a half. So, live you can round up, but home studies you have to round down. That's a really important distinction. More often than not, if you are doing some sort of video style training or even like a vodcast, or I guess maybe if a podcast is held live, then either way, you have to do some sort of editing. There are a variety of free programs that you can use. One that I use is DaVinci Resolve. So this helps me to tighten the time frames. You do have to cut out any breaks, any of that time at the beginning where you're like waiting around for people, any time at the end that is kind of open air and nothing's happening. You have to cut those out. I also use it to blur any participants who might like unmute themselves and talk during the training to help keep with their confidentiality. That's a whole nother thing. We can talk about recording with participants, but that might be a whole nother topic to go over. Regardless, if you are doing some sort of video of a live program, whether online or in person, you are going to more than likely need to edit the video. And there are free programs you can use. Some are more complicated than others, but that is something to consider if you're going to be doing home study, live to home study. Some of the live programs that NBCC notes would not make a good home study are those that are highly experiential. If you're doing a lot of activities, maybe you're handing out worksheets or something like that, the time that it took to do it live would not count for that home study. If the majority of that live program is experiential, where people are maybe getting into breakout groups, for example, that's not going to be a great training to turn into a home study option. If there are a lot of background distractions, so let's say that it's live, it's in person, you're in some sort of conference room, you've got a lot of people talking in the background, you've got a lot of like audio cutting in and out. That's not going to make a great home study program. So, those are some of the things that they note would not be a good fit to go from live to home study. You can, of course, just create home study from scratch. It doesn't have to originally have been live. That's just an option. Um, but definitely there are some live that are not going to make a great home study. And I think for any of these, if you have questions like, how easy is my site to access? How easy is it to find the information? Um, get a colleague to look at it for you. Like if they were going to go in as a participant, what would they think about this? Have somebody go in and look at it before you submit it to NBCC. That is really important. If you want me to, I'm happy to. We can talk about that. But there are, I'm sure, plenty of your colleagues, even your family members, who would go in and look at that for you and just make sure there's no broken links. There's nothing that is missing. Because often I think we create it. And so we can kind of miss out on some of the things that we did or that we missed. Whereas somebody else is coming in with a fresh view of this. They have never accessed it before, and they can give you that feedback as a brand new participant. I hope that that is helpful. I've been on here for about 40 minutes talking about the on-demand options for NBCC. This is one of the options for an ongoing provider. So, as an ongoing provider, you can apply to do live, home study, or both. If you're wanting to offer home study at all, you do have to use the ongoing provider application. That is required. That's the only way you can do it. The single programs are only for live. And a part of doing the ongoing provider application is that you've done 2 prior live programs, doesn't have to be through NBCC, that offered CEs. So if that's a topic you want to jump into next, you want me to bring to the next Ask Me Anything, I'll be happy to go over it. But I'll come back to where I started. This can be overwhelming, and I hope that you keep it simple. Don't worry about getting it to look great the first time. You just need it to check those NBCC boxes so that you can get your application submitted, get it sent over to NBCC in a way that they can go through it easily and quickly so that they can make their determination and get back to you that much easier and quicker as well. Somebody asked about the expenses. So I'm going to go back and grab, because honestly, I don't remember 100%. I'm going to put this in the chat. I'm not sure if I can reply directly to yours. Let's see. No, it doesn't look like it, but I am. Yeah, we should be able to do that, shouldn't we? I'm going to put this in the chat here. This is my article that I wrote about the costs. So for the application, that is a part of your startup costs. If you're doing the home study, you are going to be paying for that on your ongoing provider application. If you're doing just the one type, then I think it is around like $800 or something like that, just for that one type, the home study. Don't quote me on that. Double check on NBCC's website, especially if it's changed since the last time I looked. But that is how much the application itself. For other startup costs, so I created a new business. I had some consulting support for that, insurance agent, lawyer. I had insurance policies. I set up my Google Workspace, which I talked about in another Substack post, my LMS, a lot of that infrastructure. And it came out to be around $10,000 just to open the door. Does it have to cost that much? No. That is how I wanted to do it as somebody with an entrepreneurship degree who has already opened other businesses. I wanted to, quote, do it right the first time. So that is how much it cost me to really get it started. Monthly costs might be another question that you have. So each month I pay for my email marketing platform, my learning management system, my business email and phone services. Another thing I did at the beginning was use a free Google Voice. That has to be a personal Google Voice number rather than my cell phone number, which I guess I could have used. And then I kind of upped it to the business Google Voice, which does cost money. So email marketing platform, learning management system, business email and phone services, my website hosting and cloud storage, Canva, any other editing, production tools you might need, accounting software, and an accountant who helps me out. I have 2 different admins, which you may not have at the beginning, and that's totally fine. And because of that, I have HR and payroll platforms. So, how fast are you going to grow? Are you doing this all on your own? It just kind of depends upon you and your infrastructure and how much you want to put into it at the beginning. On top of monthly expenses, there are annual costs that I have divided into monthly. So I know how much to set aside each month that will catch me up on the annual costs and the monthly costs. That includes renewal fees as a CE provider. That's an annual. There's state business filings, which aren't, it's just a few $100s, but it's still a few $100s. My liability insurance, my workers' comp insurance, my accountant's fees, and my attorney fees. And for me, spread out over like the year, my annual and monthly expenses come to about $1,500 a month. I don't think anyone who tells you that you can do this at really, really low costs is being honest with you. There are folks who I see become new CE providers who talk about the surprise that they have at both the startup costs and the ongoing maintenance costs. And if we're talking about being an on demand home study type provider, there are going to be more costs, frankly, more costs that come with that than just being a live provider. So these are all things you don't have to have liability insurance. You might not have admins or employees, so you might not need workers' comp insurance. You might do it without an accountant. I'd still recommend some sort of accounting software, though. You might do it without an attorney. You might have a sole proprietorship or be combining this in with your clinical business. And so maybe your fees and filings aren't as much as mine still yet. This is going to cost quite a bit. And I think to the person who made this comment in the chat, look at your expense projections because likely what you start with isn't going to be your long term expense. It is going to change. So about $1,500 per month to operate. I hope that that is helpful. I talk a lot over in Substack about kind of the real nitty gritty type stuff of being a CE provider. One of the ones that y'all seemed to like was um, what I actually made making CE courses, and another one about whether this, as being an on demand home study provider, like, is this just passive income for me now? And spoiler alert, the answer is no. But those articles, y'all really seem to like those. So I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate any of you who showed up today, whether live or watched the replay later. Like I said before, if you have questions, concerns, please submit them. Let me go ahead and pull up my survey and I can put that in the chat as well. So if you come up with ideas for topics for me to do in the future, just plug it into that survey. It's a Google form, surprise, but it is anonymous. I don't collect your information. And I try to keep all of your responses and questions in a document that I have so that I can come back to it and keep updating it over time. So long story short, thank you so much for being here. If you have questions or concerns, send them my way, and let's see about maybe doing this again next month. All right. Thanks, y'all.